Welcome to the Uncommon Legacy Podcast. Today our guest is Abi Stumvoll. Currently a pastor at Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, Abi has been leading people to live honestly and vulnerably through God's unconditional love for 11 years. When Abi was 12 years old, she prayed, "If you can teach me how to love myself, I will change the world." This simple prayer ignited an incredible adventure of uncovering the power of love. Throughout her journey, she has seen love conquer the fear and torment that once seemed impossible to overcome. Now she travels and teaches others how to encounter the unconditional love, become wildly free, and experience abundant life. We know you'll enjoy this powerful episode. Here's our conversation with Abi Stumvoll. Well, Abi, thank you so much for being with us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're very much about discovering the journey that people are on, the story that their life is telling them, and how their choices have kind of led them to where they are today. We really feel that listening to someone else's story helps us better understand our own journey and our own story and where we're headed and the choices we make. And so with that in mind, you know, we can get a pretty good snapshot of you and what you're doing there at Bethel and all the cool things you've been a part of just by, you know, looking you up online or finding some cool information that way. But we'd love to take a look before you're known for anything, before all of that. If you could take us back to, you know, a much earlier time in your life and tell us, what was life like for you growing up?
I was the cutest, awkwardest little kid that you ever saw. So when I was really young, well, probably about 5, we got, you know, when you go to school, they do like hearing and eye testing for you to make sure that, I don't know, that you can see and hear.
Yeah.
That feels like a good idea before you go to school. And so I went and I was so excited because I was so excited to go to school. And then they found out that I had an eyesight problem. And so I was super excited about that because when you're 5, you're like, glasses are so cool. So I got glasses, but I actually had a lazy eye. And so we had to patch one of my good eye. So we cover my good eye, and then that means my bad eye has to work harder, which really means that I was blind for like 2 years of my life because I just couldn't see out of it. So I ran into everything, and I got kicked out of ballet class because I was a safety hazard for the other kids. And my mom was so cute. She used to tell me these stories every night about Charity the bird, and she was a half-blind bird, and she just had the best attitude, and she'd fly into trees, and then when she'd fall, she'd just like dust herself off and be happy. And I thought those were like the best stories, and it was only like a couple years ago that my mom was like, "You know I was talking about you, right?" Like I was trying to give you moral support. You can do this, Abi. But I had no idea. So I had that, and then I had just so many random problems. I had vampire teeth, so 2 of my teeth grew over the rest of my teeth, and I always tell people that would have worked out really cool, like in this day and age when Twilight became super big.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was just born in the wrong generation. So I had those, and then I left because everything that was kind of ended up being hard for me, I always originally wanted. So I was like, I think braces are so cool. I'd love to have braces. And then I had braces for 8 years, and the coolness wore off on that effect. And I had an afro that was out of control. My parents grew my hair, and I had ankle braces that I had to wear every day with my shoes. I was like, run, Forrest, run. And I had skin disease on my arms, where I had to put Crisco on my arms and wrap them in saran wrap at night. And like the list goes on. There was just so many things. And then I just grew up, I was a miracle child. So my parents tried to have kids. They loved kids. Before me, my mom almost died. She had a tubal pregnancy, and then she had me. And then after me, she had another miscarriage that sent her into menopause. So I was like the miracle child. And as a young kid, you know, my parents both had, the crazy thing is that when you're a kid, you really think everything's your fault. Mm-hmm. So like my mom and dad are really depressed over losing another kid. Like I think, oh, I should be able to make up for that. Or my parents' marriage is horrible. I think, oh, it's probably my fault. Although technically my parents fought over me a lot, so I didn't think it was my fault. And then you just kind of start to think that, I remember thinking, this is the weirdest thing. So I work with a lot of people, and this is what I find, that oftentimes in life, the things that you're meant to be greatest at, just little tiny lies, like things that are meant to actually speak of your destiny, the accuser ends up lying to you about just enough to send you completely off track. So like, I was the kid who was born, so you could see that and be like, wow, God really had a plan for you. There was a purpose for your life. Instead, I actually felt like God didn't want me as much as the other kids. Because I'm like, the other kids are like up next to God sitting on his lap. And here I am down here separated. So clearly he wanted them more than me, which is like a crazy thing. That doesn't even make logical sense. But I feel like that's what the accuser does.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
So all of that to say, then I had, you name it. I hit all kinds of physical problems. I have a chronic problem with my hormones. I got in a car wreck and I couldn't sit and or stand for longer than 30 minutes in high school. It was just like my whole life was like chaotic, and I had tons of self-hatred and shame, and I was just emotionally tormented, always feeling like I wasn't enough, always feeling like I was failing, always feeling like I needed to be better. It's a lot to try to live up to being a miracle. So if I was to describe from 20 below, I would just say like tormented.
Wow. Man. You know, Abby, in your home, was it a faith-based home? Did you grow up in a Christian home and attend church regularly, or is that something that happened for you in life much later?
Yeah, you know what? It's so interesting. I did grow up in a faith-based home. My parents love God and introduced me to him at a really young age. I don't ever remember not knowing God's voice. Like, I don't ever remember not knowing God. When I was young, I would be like, hey, Mom, God's talking to me. Do you think you could shut up for a little bit? Because I need to pay attention to him. I probably didn't say shut up. I probably was like, could you be quiet? And then my mom would be like, Abby. And I'd be like, Mom, he's still talking. Why? You got to wait until I say he's done. And so, as a little kid, I, always heard the Lord's voice. And this is what I think is interesting about my story, because sometimes people tell these great stories where they're like, my life was horrible, and then I met Jesus, and everything changed.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you're like, oh, those sound so great. Can I, quit knowing God and then re-meet him so that everything can change again? And so I think I used to pray that, actually, God, help. And so for me, a huge part of my journey was that I actually did have to re-meet God. Because even though I grew up, my parents loved me, we grew up, I had a relationship with God, a lot of my views of God were just twisted slightly enough that actually added to my torment as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that's I've heard some of the talks that you've given before, and I asked that question purposely because I think it paints a really good picture for a lot of people who've grown up in church culture, myself included. You know, we had Sean Bowles a while back on the podcast, and he said he went through yeah, we do too. He's awesome. He talked about going through a season of religious detox is what he called it, you know? And I mean, I think anyone who walks into a genuine, robust faith for their own life is going to go, especially if they've been in the faith their whole life, they're going to go through that. So you just sharing that part, I think so validating to people who may be listening that, you know, they've walked in faith their whole life, but they've had all these bad experiences while following Jesus, while knowing Jesus. And thinking, like you said, that, man, I just have to go re-meet this character of Jesus. And that's true. Sometimes maybe we do need to re-meet him because maybe we don't know him the way that he really would love for us to know him, you know?
Yeah. And I found that a lot of, so everything I described, I didn't feel like I was enough. I felt like I was always failing. All of that I felt in my life, I brought into my relationship with God too. You know, so I always felt like he thought I was always failing. I always thought that he felt like I wasn't enough. So it was the two worlds you can really take what you feel about yourself and believe that that's what God feels about you too. And that makes it complicated.
Wow, that's really good. You know, before we move on and talk about how you're at Bethel School, Supernatural Ministry, and your career in life coaching and speaking, I'd really love to just kind of take a moment on that. You know, you talked about growing up with all these thoughts of self-consciousness and self-hatred about yourself. So could you tell us about the process of how? Because I mean, you're on this with us. You're talking publicly now, and those are big hurdles to overcome when you're dealing with those kinds of issues in your life. And I've heard your testimony and know what God's done in your life. And so I just like to give you a chance to kind of share what was it like for you to walk out of those seasons in your life and those thoughts about yourself, and how, just really tell us, how did that happen for you?
Yeah, well, I will say that it's kind of, sometimes when people retell their stories, it's so interesting because you can either be like, and then this one thing happened and everything changed, or it's like, it took 20 years.
Right.
And that's less encouraging. But my story feels like one of those stories where it's both. I remember praying when I was young, like, God, if you could teach me how to love myself, like, everything would change. If I could love myself, people would want to know you. If I could love myself, people would be interested in who you are, because it's just so rare to genuinely love yourself. Like, they would want to know where the source of love was. And so I think I started that prayer, and it's been like a 20-year journey of different seasons, God showing me different things about his love. One of my favorite, so like, that's the nutshell.
Yeah.
Go on a 20-year love journey with God. But I'll give you a few like highlighted moments. I remember when so half of my religious view of God was so much like that we were made to accomplish things for him. And again, that feels like just a slight, like, yes, I feel like I am born with a destiny and a purpose. But if you start to feel like your destiny and your purpose matter more than you do, or matter more than God loving you, then you're going to feel tormented by having to accomplish something. So I remember having this moment where I had been suicidal for years, and I just had this moment where I was like, God, you have to give me a reason that's worth living in order for like me to do this. And so I love how God doesn't always answer things right away. So like I had this epic moment where I'm like yelling at God like Job, like, tell me why I'm alive. And then, like, 2 years later, he gave me an answer. But I was at this church. I went up for an altar call. This woman sat and prayed with me, and she got a word about my life. Like, she was like, I feel like this happened to you as a kid. And she said something that had actually happened to me. And she walked me through some healing about it. And while she was doing it, all of a sudden, I just heard the Lord say, you were born to be loved and to love. And it was like all of the pressure, everything else just lifted away. And not even just like in this one divine moment that magically changed everything. It was like that began a whole mindset shift of like, okay, my goal is not to be perfect for God. My goal is not to save the world for God. My goal is to let him love me so much that like love spills out of me.
Man.
That felt so much easier. That felt like it took all of the weight off. And really, naturally, if you let God love you, I mean, the Bible says we love because he first loved us, that we can love because he loves, that God is love. And so, like, I just changed my whole aim of being a good Christian and being a good friend and being, like, to just being like, okay, God, radically love me so that I can love people with that love.
Man.
Wow. That's powerful. Abby, with that in mind, what does that look like today? Because it's kind of become, it's your life message, and you're using that as a tool now to help others kind of experience the same thing. So what does that actually look like with what you do today?
What does love look like with what I do today?
Yeah, like how are you helping other people? And mostly I'm thinking about the people listening who are like, I don't feel the love of God like what you're explaining, and it's not transformative in the way you're talking. How do you walk people into, experiencing a transformative love from God?
Yeah. Well, there's so many ways. That's because I really have tried to break it down as practically as I can, because I think that's what most people get stuck at in Christianity is when you don't feel loved, your behavior is harder to manage. So the more loved you are, the more everything else in your life works out. The problem is most people have a hard time connecting to the love of God. So I've spent years coming up with lots of different ways. So I would say, like, one thing I tell people is get rid of secrets, which is a simple thing, but as long as you have secrets, you will always have this belief that people love you, but they don't really know. And I always think about the verse, confess your sins to one another so that you, what is it? Confess your sins so that you may be healed.
Right, yeah.
And I thought, like, that's part of, like, not, like, I need to confess even to earn forgiveness, but, like, actually when somebody can love you in the place where you feel most unlovable, it heals part of your soul. So that's one of the things I always tell people, like, because as long as you have secrets, you will constantly have a liar in the back of your head saying, whenever somebody loves you, whenever God loves you, whenever something good happens, yeah, but they don't really know. So I look at, like, what kind of things can we get rid of that hinder love? So secrets is one of those. I talk a lot about getting over shame. One of the things I've learned is the more you partner with loving yourself, most of the time you can hear God's voice more. So even if I don't believe it, like, I remember I had very few suddenlies in my life. Most of my life has been processed, but I did have one suddenly, and it was, I was having a meltdown getting ready, and my husband came in and he said, I just want you to repeat after me. And so he just spoke truth over me. The truth is, I'm beautiful. And I was just like, the truth is, I'm beautiful. Like, I didn't believe it. I thought it was stupid. But I knew, like, I need to partner with this. So I spoke it out over me. And it was like something broke. And I think I've learned, like, the more I speak truth out over myself about love, the more I can hear God's voice of love.
Man, that's really good. You know, Abby, I think a lot of people especially who've been going to church for a long time, grew up in that culture. You know, we're constantly taught about serving God and being used by God, and, you know, I mean, constantly hearing those terms of, you know, of almost subservience to God, where we're just kind of at His behest. And while I'm sure I know a portion of that, there's some truth in a portion of that, but the reality of it is it's more of a partnership and relationship, and we know that. And so I love this message of loving yourself. But when we're serving a God who teaches us to be focused outward on loving others, why is it so important to learn to love ourselves?
Yeah. Well, first, I think, like, you know, the Bible, when they go to Jesus and they're like, break down all of the laws, like, what's most important? And God says, love the Lord. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, love your neighbor, and love yourself. And I call that, like, the divine balancing system. Because we love because God loves us, and then we can love God back. So loving God means we have to receive love. And then the love your neighbor as yourself is, like, the perfect balancing system. Because if you love your neighbor and you don't love yourself, that's codependence. And if you love yourself and not your neighbor, that's narcissism. Yeah. So literally, it's meant to be this divine balance in life. And I think for most of the time, the church has focused on loving others. But the great thing is, when you love yourself, you know, Jesus said, a house divided can't stand.
Right.
And He showed me that, like, me being at war with myself was actually defeating, like, it was sucking energy out. It's almost like if you have an iPhone and you have a bunch of apps open, how it drains your battery.
Yeah.
Well, I found that, like, self-hatred and self-criticism and being mean to myself, like, actually takes a lot of my battery. And then I can't use my phone for the things that actually are important. So I've learned, like, in order for me to serve the world, loving myself fills my battery so that I have the power to actually love others.
That's great. So, I mean, there's this foundational aspect at play in how we perceive ourselves, because it's really like you're saying. I think when we spoke with your husband the other day, Justin, we had a similar conversation about, you know, receiving love so that we could give love, and being able to receive the love of God, and it changes the way that we view ourselves. When we can actually break down our walls of distrust and learn to trust God, and even just trust that He loves us and that He actually likes us.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
One of the things that I tell people is you should be hearing from God all the things He likes about you. Mm-hmm. Like, you should be asking Him, like, what is your favorite thing about, like, I could sit here right now and be like, God, what do you like about me in this interview right now? Like, on a regular basis, I want to know he has favorite lists all of the time. And so, like, I think prophecy is tuning into God's favorite list about somebody else. That's part of prophecy to me. Wow. So I should also be tuning into God's favorite list about me. So I literally, one of the things that changed my view on him was I looked at him as a smiling God. And literally, I just imagined it. It wasn't like I had an encounter where he became smiling. I was like, I just have to imagine you're happy sometimes. And that really changed things. But then, like, imagine God smiling at you, and then what does he like about you? What are the things he thinks you're doing good at? What are the things he made about you? There should in every moment, he's thinking something that he loves about you. I think about my husband, and, like, on a regular basis, you could ask me, like, what's one thing you like about how he does this? And I could tell you. So God has this endless list of things that he's loving about us, things that he's proud about us, things that he's like, look at, you did that just 1 second better than you did it the last time. Or, you know, like, I always love this. My favorite is the story of Sarah and how she's in the Hebrews Hall of Faith. And it says, she did not waver in unbelief. And then you go back to the story of God telling Sarah that she's going to have a kid, and she laughs at God, and then she lies to God and says she didn't laugh. And I'm like, that is crazy. Like, she lied to God face to face, which is ballsy. But then I think to myself, like, God thought that was great faith. Can you imagine? Like, God's like, oh, you're laughing at me, and you're lying about laughing at me, and this is great faith.
Wow.
So in my head, I'm like, I need to tune in to that voice of God. The voice of God who sees the little yes inside my heart, that sees faith, because the more I hear what he sees as good, the more that gets magnified, the more I do that. You naturally, like, okay, I'm going to tell you a secret. When I go get my toenails done, they always give you a massage when you get a pedicure. And my secret is, when they massage me, I tell them how great it is. And every time I get a longer massage than all my friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people love to do things when they feel like they're doing it well. So the more that we hear from God that we're doing well, the more we will actually want to do more.
Wow.
Wow, that's awesome. I think we get it backwards so often, where we think we have to do things to hear that.
Yes.
You know, and really it's the opposite. And you'll actually do a whole lot more for God, you know, from that place of, you know, being celebrated, knowing you're doing well. It's crazy how we've got it so backwards for so long.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I played basketball, the days that I was, like, so mental. So when I felt like I was awesome, I played great. When I felt like I was just failing at everything, I played horribly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like one of the things I've learned is, like, the best way for me to get out of a bad cycle in my life is to hear what God thinks I'm doing great. And he sees things, he sees little yeses in our life, and he gets excited about them.
Man. You know what I love about that is that God wouldn't be proven a liar. You know, he's telling us the truth.
Totally.
So when he sees something amazing and he calls it out, whether it's in that voice in our heart and our head, or prophetically through another person, however he chooses to love us in that moment, it's the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and we
even if you can't see it.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yep. And a lot of times we can't see it or don't believe it, even if we could see it, because we can't believe that about ourselves. But I believe that, you know, and I'm sure you've seen it in your own life, he will constantly put us in situations to be loved by other people for his sake, so that we can see how much he loves us and how much delight he actually takes in just who we are.
Yeah.
You know, I would love, Abby, just to focus for a moment about what you're doing in your career. You know, I know you're teaching at Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, but I would really love to move along to what you're doing as a life coach. Could you just tell us, you know, how you got into that? Why life coaching? What was it that really drew you into that, and what's that kind of look like in your life right now?
Yeah, it was an accident, actually, which I love. It was, so when me and my husband got married, we took a year where we just really, it was like one big inner healing counseling session. We traveled around the U.S. for 6 months, and then we lived in L.A. for 6 months, and it was like, you know, when you're trapped with your person, you have to deal with all of your stuff. So we ended up working through all kinds of heart issues and walking through, and it was like really healing and fun and crazy. But my husband was like, so like, this isn't going to help our careers at all. And I'm like, somehow the Lord will make it. God redeems time differently than we understand. So we moved to Reading, and we had a friend who just came over, and she was like, man, I'm getting so much breakthrough being around you guys in my life that I want to pay you guys. I actually think that you're made to do this for your career. And so I'm going to pay you. Would you let me pay you? And so she started coming over, and we'd meet with her. And it's just when you're intentionally meeting to help somebody through breakthrough, you get so much more than just like if you're hanging out. So she started getting so much breakthrough that then the people in her life were like, what is happening? And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting with these people. So they started hounding us, and they were like, we want to meet with you. And we were like, well, we don't really do this. This isn't like a thing that we do. So we turned them down. We turned them down. We turned them down. We turned them down. And finally, like 6 months later, we're like, fine, we'll meet with you. Mostly because we gave up on turning them down. And so then we met with them, and the same thing happened. They felt so much breakthrough that then the people around their life wanted to know, and then the people around their life, and it just kind of snowballed. We never really set out to start a business. We never really set out to start a career like this, and it just grew and grew and grew until now I'm actually training more people because I have such a long waiting list and have to turn people down so much that I'm training up more people to be able to do it.
Wow, that's awesome.
And this is what I've learned. The more breakthrough you get in the life, the more you can give away. And so that's what's fun. It feels like every hard thing I went through has been redeemed. Like, oh, I had to pay a price to overcome suicide. I paid the price. But now, not only because I had to walk out a process with it, now I can help other people walk out the process because I actually know how the process goes.
That's great.
Oh, I hated myself so much. I had anxiety attacks. I actually had to fight out of that. Well, I know what the fight is like, so now I can teach you how to fight so that you can get out of it too. It feels really kind of God that it didn't go to waste.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Great.
He's using the pain you had as a tool. It's kind of amazing. What is with being a life coach? Are there common issues that you see like with almost everybody or with most people? And if so, how do you practically walk people through some of those more common issues?
Yeah. Okay. Well, a couple things that I'll give you like a couple things of homework that I pretty much make everybody do. One thing that I do is I make people make a list of every night. I want you to write down 5 things that you did well that day. Because that's how you build momentum and hope. So, okay. Hope and faith are like best friends, and faith is the most incredible, miraculous material that we have. And so the more hope we have, the more we engage the spirit of faith. Well, you have to be feeling successful to have hope. And so most people get stuck because they're always looking at what they're not doing right or what wasn't happening. So I'm like, even if you have to write down 5 things that like, I'm doing this better than 10 years ago, whatever it is, what are ways that you're seeing yourself actually grow? The other thing, now, these are not all connected. I'm just telling you the most common things. Another common thing is most people live in an imaginary world. So they are imagining what everybody thinks about them. So, like, an imaginary world would be like, oh, my gosh, they're not saying many They must not think that what I'm saying is good enough. Or, oh, I can really tell that they're with me in this because their sounds great. Like either one of those, that's I'm saying about you guys. Like I could be imagining what you guys are thinking based on my perception. But either one of them is made up in my head, right?
Yes, yeah.
So what I tell people is if you're going to live in an imaginary world, live in a happy one.
That's
like
great.
if you're going to make up if you're going to make up what people think about you, then make up positive things. So I will make people so most of the time people will be like, I went into that meeting and I'm sure everybody thought I was stupid because I said this and I fumbled over my words. So I'll say, okay, well, what are 5 things that the people in the meeting could have been thinking of you positively? And that's just, so I find that the accuser comes a lot through our imaginations. It says casting down every vain imagination and thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of Jesus Christ. So I always think, like, don't imagine that people think you're horrible.
Yeah.
That is a horrible way to be in agreement with the accuser, but everybody does it. Everybody is thinking, oh, did they think I was stupid? Oh, did they? And so I just can't. I don't let people do that. So that's the second thing that I most commonly teach people how to do, is to imagine. Because most of the time people are so consumed with what they're thinking about, they're not judging you as much as you think anyway.
That's so true. That's
Yeah,
so true.
that's true.
They're likely having the same thoughts that you are at the same time that you're having them.
Totally. And even if they are judging you, what I've learned is the more I feel better, the better I do. So I might as well imagine you think I'm doing great, because then I will end up acting great.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to live in a fake world, I'll make it up to be happy. And then the last thing that I say was the most common thing I help people with is I help people talk to their parents.
Wow.
So many people have all of these issues, and they've literally never thought about talking to their parents about it. And I'm like, that might be so easily solved. Have you ever told your parents that it actually was really difficult for you, that they were angry all the time, and that your heart still hurts, and you need to hear them say that they're proud of you? Have you ever ask them what they love about you? Have you ever told them that you're not sure if they care? Like, try it. Worst case scenario, it's not going to be worse than it is now. But I would say the amount of miracles I have seen happen just because people started being honest with their emotions with their parents
That's so good.
is unbelievable.
That's so true.
That was unexpected.
It happened to me. I'll say this last thing. I'm so sorry I'm talking so much.
No,
but,
no, it's
Go
great.
for it.
I was in counseling for years. And then probably about, 7 years ago, I went home and I ended up having this conversation with my dad. And I was like, Dad, it really felt like you were angry with me. It felt like I was never enough. Like, when I got A's, you always said, is there something she can be doing better? Like, I just told him all my feelings. And he just listened and cried with me and just said, I love you. That was so not what I wanted for you. Like, I never would want you to feel like you weren't enough. I would never want you to feel like I was angry at you. I could totally see how that happened. It was actually that I was angry about this other thing. But as a kid, of course, you didn't know that. He just validated it and loved me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this could have saved 5 years of counseling.
Yeah.
Like, I spent 5 years talking around all of this stuff, and I could have just had a conversation with you. So now that feels like, parents, now, some parents are crazy, and they won't respond well. But in general, I would say parents want to have good connection with their kids.
Yeah. That's good.
And even if your parents don't respond well, sometimes just having a voice about it will heal you, even if they don't respond well. Mm-hmm. Like, letting them know, hey, actually, you really abused me as a kid, and that really affected me. Sometimes just having a voice changes the cycle for people. So, anyway.
No, that's
good.
really good. That's really powerful. I know, I've walked through issues in my own life and with friends and who deal with that very thing of it kind of comes down to, have you talked to your parents about this? Have you dealt with this issue in your heart and know where it really stems from? And I walked through that a number of years ago in my own life where I had amazing parents, but still they weren't perfect, just like I'm not perfect. And so I had questions for them. Why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't I know this? Why didn't you teach it to me this way? And most of the time what was interesting when I would have those conversations, it usually boiled down to is, honestly, we always loved you, but we were doing the best job we could with the information we had. And it was like, man, we're sorry. We wish we could have done better. And, I think that was such a freeing conversation for me to have with them. And just like you said, it's so powerful just to kind of take that risk sometimes and voice who you are and what you're feeling. And it pays off. We'd love to, we're kind of moving towards the end here, and we would love to talk to you real quick about someone in your life who's been a mentor or a father, mother figure. That's a huge focus of what we do, and that's a large reason why we do this podcast is because we believe people's stories and journey in life with us is part of what helps us become who we are. We need those kinds of friendships. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about someone who has been a mentor in your life and really impacted you in a large way.
Do you want like a current one or a past one, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. That's your call. You can give us a current one or a past one, either one.
Oh my gosh, this is so hard. Okay. I'll just talk about one right now in my life, because I think mentors come in all shapes and sizes.
Yes. Yeah.
So right now in my life, I would say that Eric Johnson is a mentor in my life. And it's interesting because he's not actually that much older than me. Like, he could be my brother. He's like, couldn't be my father. And so sometimes I think we think like mentor is like super far ahead of you. But he saw me years ago and was like, I think that you should be, like, I believe that you could be a speaker. And so he started pouring into me and talking to me about what he knew about speaking, giving me opportunities to speak. And he would and it sounds like funny things as a mentor to me, but he would just he'd be like, make sure that you come say hi to me. I actually want to see you. I saved a spot for you. And I found that just he really was invested in knowing me and wanted to make room for me. And so I could tell you things that I've learned from him, because he has taught me a lot of practical things. But I would say more than what I've learned from him, I've been moved by his kindness. Mm. And that has taught me a lot about God. I'm like, oh, weird that it took you telling me that I'm invited to sit with you at this thing at events. It took you telling me that 20 times before I did it. That's so weird. Why is that? Oh, that's probably what it's like with God. He wants us to come have access, but it takes us a while to believe him that we can. But he's content just inviting us over and over and over again. So for me, I just think he's mentored me in a lot of kindness. And like I said, there's different kinds of mentors. He's the kind of mentor that is like, I'm actually going to find room to make you happen. I'm going to give you space. I'm going to shove you out. I'm going to shove you out of the nest so you can figure out that you can fly. So I think that has been a really great thing for me, is having somebody who has vision for me beyond what I had vision for, and who then gives me a moment to actually do it.
That's awesome. With that being said, could you think of, you're a life coach, in a way you're mentoring a lot of people all the time. Yeah. As us listening, I think it's important that we're mentored, but we also have somebody that we're pouring into. What can we do practically to mentor, to father other people?
Well, one of the things I always think is, what is it that you feel breakthrough in? Mm-hmm. What is it that you feel powerful in? Because that should be the area, that's a great area to mentor in. So even Eric was ahead of me on the journey of speaking, so he could pour into me in that way. And he had access to that. If I was a financial genius, I would pour into people's finances. I'd be like, let me help you budget. Let me help you. So I think the first thing is, to be a good mentor, you have to figure out what it is that you have that is worth giving away. Mm-hmm. And then once you feel oh, I'm really good at listening, or I'm really good at being loyal, or I can be really stable for somebody. Everybody has needs always. So once you know what you have to give, I think you can just pray and have God brings people. Because I'm there's never a lack of people who need mentors.
Yeah, that's so true.
So true.
I'm once you figure out that you have something to give, they will find you.
It just happens. That's so true.
Yeah. Well, Abby, with that thought in mind about mentors, we had a lot of guests that mentioned, it was really interesting early on to us, that kind of caught us off guard, that they mentioned mentors, certain people like authors, people like books that have really mentored them through seasons. And so with that being said, are there any books or resources that have really had a profound impact on your life that you could recommend to us?
Oh, yeah. And this is not a shameless plug, but I have a website, and on it I literally have a list of books that I love, because this is the most people want to hear how to find out that God's loving. So I wrote a list of books that helped me find out that he was loving. And so I have a list of that. But I would say The Shack. Love The Shack. There's a book called So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore. I loved that book. Are we talking just Christian books or secular books?
Anything, yeah.
Anything that you found helpful and impactful to you.
Okay, I love Malcolm Gladwell stuff.
Yeah.
So he wrote Outliers. He wrote David versus Goliath. I love that. I love Sean Bowles, so his new book. Definitely Keep Your Love On by Danny Silk.
Yeah.
Amazing book. My husband wrote a book. I love that book. It's called The Tree of Life. Krista Black is a great author. She just wrote a new book. I can never remember the name of it. It's, I think, like Heart Made Whole or something. But her old book is named God Loves Ugly. That's a great book. There's a book called Lord Willing that I just read by Jessica Kelly, and she shares her story of walking through her 3-year-old son getting cancer and wrestling out, like, where's God's goodness in the midst of pain. And that was an amazing book. That's a few.
Awesome. Well, Abby, as we wrap up here, how can you mention your website? So what's the best way for people to get connected with what you're doing, find your teachings, your products, and your favorites list and all of that good stuff?
Yep, it's Abi Stumvoll, ABI, Stumvoll.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Abby, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, so nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Uncommon Legacy podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Abi Stumvoll. We encourage you to go check out what she's doing and stay connected with her at abistumvoll.com. We will have all the links and resources mentioned in today's show over on our website, uncommonlegacy.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor and head over to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. We have many more amazing guests just like Abby coming on the show, and you won't want to miss a single one. You can head over to our website and join our community. We send out an email newsletter once a week with updates on new podcast episodes and blog posts, as well as some exclusive content. Also, go like our Facebook page to stay up to date on new podcast episodes, blog posts, and giveaways. Thanks again for listening to the Uncommon Legacy podcast. We'll see you next time.